Before we get into the details of the Farbrengen of this afternoon, it was a very usual Farbrengen today, where primarily in the first Sikha, the Rebbe brought out the greatness of every Jew and how dear and precious every Jew is by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore there is no room for anybody to say anything negative or derogatory on Yidden in any way whatsoever. And should somebody do something like that, only thing that he has to do is simply to go ahead and do tshuva if he has spoken something against the children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We'll try and relate a little bit of the Farbrengen. The Rebbe began the Farbrengen that the Haftarah of this Shabbos, the Haftarah of Parshas Vayikra, begins with a pasuk in Yeshaya. Am zu yatzarti li, the Rebbe says, I have created this nation for me. Tehilasi isaperu. They will say my praise. And this is the Haftarah which we say on Shabbos Parshas Vayikra. Now it is known what is brought in Sfarim that the Haftarah relates to the contents of the Sedra. How did Haftarahs originate? There was a time when there was a Gzeira, when they did not permit Yidden to do Kriyas HaTorah. So the Chachamim in that time thought of something that we will find a Perek in Navi which will relate to the Parsha of the week. And that's how they kept on the idea of people knowing what Parsha it is. Until later, when this decree was removed, still this minig, this custom still remained of reading the Parsha, of reading a Haftarah, in other words, a Perek in Navi that relates to the contents of the Sedra. So the question arises, what shaykhs does Amzu Yatzarti Li Tehilasi Yisaperu, this pasuk, have to the contents of Parshas Vayikra? The Rebbe brings out that the contents of Vayikra is korbanos. What is the concept of a korban? Korban, we know, as it is emphasized in Chassidus, korban is meloshin kiruv, closeness. What happens when a Yid brings a korban? A Yid spends his own money and brings a korban. And in Parshas Vayikra, the Torah discusses all the different and various types of korbanos. But regarding what type of korban, whether we are talking about a korban oila or a korban mincha or any type of korban, whatever the case is, a more expensive korban or a less expensive korban. And everything had to come from the Yid's pocket. Even the salt that was brought with the korban had to be salt which was purchased from the money of the Yid who brought the korban. And all of this led to a closeness between the one bringing the korban and to whom the korban is brought. Kiruv. A closeness was created between Yidden and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this exactly is the same idea what we emphasize in the Haftarah. Amzu yatzarti li, the Rebbe says, this is my nation that I have created. Tehilasi isaperu. And just by the mere fact that Yidden are in existence, this in itself leads to Tehilasi isaperu, that to the praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Just like we know Shamayim misapchem kveit keil, that by the mere fact that there's a heaven in existence, and the Rebbe created a world, all of this leads to that it relates the kveit keil, the honor and glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The same when we're talking about Yidden. Amzu yatzarti li, this is the nation we can point with our fingers and say, this is the nation which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created for him. And automatically, just by the existence of Yidden, it leads to Tehilasi Yisaperu, to tell and relate the praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In Yidden, we find various levels. Like the pasuk tells us, Atem nitzavim hayoim kulchem, and then the pasuk goes on listing 10 madreges in Yidden, beginning from Rasheichem Shiftechem, until Chayte Veitzecha V'Sheiv Memecha, from the leaders, until those who chop the wood and carry the water. The same when we're talking in Karbonis, there are also various levels. And when we're talking and getting close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it also means just like there are different types of Karbonis, it means there are different levels of one getting close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And what do we say? Atem nitzovim hayoim. Today, not only when the Rebbe gave Torah to Yidden, as it's emphasized in Mamarim of the Alter Rebbe and of the Mittler Rebbe and of the Tzemach Tzedek, see this emphasizes very strongly that Hayoim means today, Mamish today. Today is Atem Nitzovim Hayoim Kulchem, Klal Yisrael. is standing, and as Chassidus emphasizes, standing is an expression of firm standing. Everybody is standing together, kulchem. This is the same idea as Amzu Yatzartili, that the Rebbe has created us as our nation, pointing at us that we are His nation. Excuse me. And Marabetz boy v'oimazeh, we can point with our finger and show this is it. And this leads to Tehilasi Yisaperu, to relate the praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Furthermore, what is the taich of an Am, of a nation? So it's brought in Chassidus a lot. Am is Maloshin Gacholim Oimemois, an extinguished coal, a coal that does not have any fire anymore. And nonetheless we say, even those Yidden that are on a level of Gacholim Oimemais, still we have to know, Ein Melech Beloi Am. How could there be a king? A king can only be when he has a nation. He can have children, he may have ministers, he may have servants. All of this does not make him a king. What makes him for a king? Only when there is a nation. And when we're talking about Yidden as a nation, regardless whatever Madrege Yid is in, he's still considered the Am of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As we just mentioned, Gacholim Oimemois, even an extinguished coal, is also called Am. And this is what makes HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be a Melech. What makes HaKadosh Baruch Hu a Melech? Amzu Yotzarti Li. It is this nation that I have created, and then automatically this leads to Tehilasi Yisaperu. As the Alter Rebbe emphasizes in Tanya, what a Yid is. So the Alter Rebbe brings the pasuk in the second chapter of Tanya that a neshama v'yid is chelik elakami mal, which is a quote of a pasuk. Then the Alter Rebbe adds on the word mamish. What does the Alter Rebbe mean by adding on the word mamish? He's teaching us pshat in the pasuk. Mamish is blushing that it is tangible. When we touch a yid, we are touching godliness. Amzu Yotzartili. When we are touching this nation, the nation of Bnei Yisrael, each and every one of Yidden is a chelek, a lekam, imal, a part of godliness, but not something which remains so in theory. It comes down in actuality, and it is tangible, so it is mamish, the mamashes. We can, when we touch something, we say we have the mamish of the thing, we have the item is tangible and we have it and we touch it, we can feel it. The same way when we are talking about the fact that each and every Yid is a chelik, a lekam, imal, and as the Alter Rebbe adds on with the word mamish. And therefore it is our obligation to express the proper love to each and every Jew. As the Harizal writes that before davening we have to say V'ahavta l'reyacha kamocha, and this is something which is printed in the Siddur, not something which we just leave on the shelf. In order for us to go through a proper davening, we have to have a Siddur, and in the Siddur we have the guide. Siddur guides us how to daven. So right before davening, we are told that before davening we have to proclaim Hareini mikabel olai, I am accepting upon myself mitzvahs asay shel V'ahavta l'reyacha kamocha. And here the Rebbe says that we all know that yesh shishim ribu oisiyis l'Torah, that each and every Yid has his letter in the Sefer Torah. And when one can go out and say something against the Yid, which means he's making this individual Yid's letter in the Sefer Torah puzzle, the effect of it is that the entire Sefer Torah becomes puzzle, to the extent that the words of Anoichi Hashem Elokecha that are written in this Torah are also puzzle. So how can one go ahead and passel a Sefer Torah by saying that Yidden are in a level of passel or Isis in a Sefer Torah? If we are passeling the Sefer Torah, it leads to it that the entire Sefer, if we're passeling one letter, it leads to it that the entire Sefer Torah becomes passel. Here the Rebbe brings a halacha. There's a halacha if one is a shaliach tzibur. In other words, he goes to the Amid, and when he goes to the Amid, he's representing the entire community. And what does tzibur stand for? Tzibur, we know, is an abbreviation of tzaddikim, beinanim, and then there's the vav that attaches the tzaddikim beinanim with the reish, referring to Rishayim. The Rebbe, who only speaks positive, he didn't even spell out the word Rishayim. But he says attach it with the reish, and we know what the reish stands for. So there is a halacha that if somebody goes to the Amid Shliach Tzibur. And there is one person in the community whom this person has a hatred to, regardless who the person is, whether he's a tzaddik, he's a Beinani, or he's those that are resembled in the Reish. And the Shliach Tzibur has a hatred to one of these Yidden. The halacha is that he is not permitted to be a Shliach Tzibur. And he has to leave the Yomid and go ahead and allow somebody else to take over the Yomid. It is prohibited for him to daven by the Yomid under such circumstances. Especially when we're talking nowadays, how dear every Yid is by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every Yid, the existence of every Yid, is simply a miracle. After what we have gone through, after all the tzaras and gzeras which we have gone through, and especially what we have gone through in generation before ours, obviously referring to the Holocaust, the existence of each and every Yid is a miracle. And on these Yidden who are in existence today, the pasuk is again referring to Amzu Yatzarti, to each and every Yid. This is the nation that I have created. Yatzarti li, I have created for me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Tehi losi yisaperu. And here the Rebbe brings the famous Psak Din in the Rambam, where the Rambam paskins regarding the halachas of Gittin. Rambam says if a Jew is supposed to, in a case where one is obliged to give a get al pi halacha, and he does not want to give the get. So the Rambam says, we force him until he will say that he wants. So the question arises, if he does not want to give the get, and he says that he wants, what value is his saying? He's forced to say so. That doesn't mean that he really wants to give. And the Rambam explains that the true desire of each and every Jew is to fulfill the wish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The only thing is, there are circumstances that led to it that he's not fulfilling it. And therefore, when he says, I want, and when he's forced to do it, and he says, I want, this is an expression of the pnimis, of the in-depth of the essence of his neshama. And the essence of the neshama of a Yid definitely wants to fulfill the wish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we all know that this is only a result of the act of the Yetzer Hara. As the Gemara tells us, there are three that HaKadosh Baruch Hu regrets them every day. And one of them is the Yetzer Hara. Because the real wish and desire of each and every Yid is to fulfill the wish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As we quoted earlier from Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe explains how dear every Yid is, that explaining the pasuk that every neshama is a chelik elakam mima'al, Alter Rebbe adds on with the word mamish. This is explained at length in the writings of the Tzemach Tzedek, who was the grandson of the Alter Rebbe. And as we all know, that the Tzemach Tzedek was born on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and that is when the Alter Rebbe said a maimer, which was the foundation of the Sefer of Tanya, the first three prakim of Tanya. The Alter Rebbe said when the birth of the Tzemach Tzedek was celebrated, and soon we will have the Yolzet of the Tzemach Tzedek, 13 days in the month of Nisan. But together with it, Tzemach Tzedek also relates to the inyan of Geula, as we know that regarding Mashiach it is brought in Gemara that Tzemach would be his name, or Tzedek would be his name. So therefore this has to do bichlal with inyan of Geula. And the Tzemach Tzedek explains at length this idea of the Alter Rebbe, how each and every neshama is part of godliness, is part, mamish is a mamoshes of a chelik, of a portion of a lakami mal. And here the Rebbe continued to do very strong blessings to those Yidden that are living in Eretz Yisrael. That the Rebbe should bless them, and together with us, with Arichus Yomim V'Shanim Toives. Those Yidden that Hashgacha Pratis has led to it, that they are residing in Eretz Yisrael. And soon we will all be joining them in Eretz Yisrael. We know there are certain mitzvahs that can only be fulfilled at a time when everybody, Kol Yisrael, are alad Masam, when all Yidden are in Eretz Yisrael. But we will be joining them, not only us, but as it is brought that with the coming of Mashiach, it will be Hikitzu Verananu Sheikh Neyafa, all the neshamas of the past will also rise, and they will all join us together in Eretz Yisrael, and everybody in Eretz Yisrael now should be healthy and have Arichus Yomim V'Shanim Toives, and have whatever they need, and any type of kitrug, which is aroused on Yidden, has no effect whatsoever. The Rebbe applied the expression, it is bottle ka'afre da'ara, like we will be saying Erev Pesach. It is not in existence, just like dust. Dust just does not exist, and will not have any effect whatsoever, especially that we are in the month of Nisan. And as the Gemara tells us, if one sees the word Nisan in his dream, he can expect Nisei Nisim, the double Nun. And especially that we are in the year of Tafshin Nun, which is also a special year. And here the Rebbe referred that no part of Eretz Yisrael, which was given to us by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we all remember the very first Rashi in Bereshis, where Rashi tells us that the Rebbe was the one that created the world, and it's within his power to give it to whom he wants to, and therefore the Rebbe is the one that has given it to us, and we should not give up, not even on any drop of land whatsoever, and especially when we're talking about Yerushalayim, and Yerushalayim that has the Koisel HaMaravi, the spot of the Beis HaMikdash is in Yerushalayim. So definitely not to give back anything whatsoever. And we should all be Zeiche, just like we read today in the Torah, Vayikra el Moshe, that the Rebbe called to Moshe. So we all know that there is a level of Moshe within each and every Yid. There's the spark of Moshe within each and every one of us. And the Rebbe should address himself to each and every one of us regarding the concept of karbanos, which karbanos is an expression of getting closeness. This call of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to each and every Yid will arouse a closeness from each and every Yid to the Rebbe, until until we will be taken totally out of Golas. And everything should be done amid simcha. And the Rebbe implied, many times refers to Friedrich Rebbe's name was Yosef, and Yosef Hashem li bein acher. That anyone that does in yonim of acher that are opposite to kedusha do not exist, and that falls apart. And what happens is everything becomes, and it is obvious in everything how it is a bein to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it is a son of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and all of this is done amidst the feeling of Yitzchak, which is an expression of simcha. Then the Rebbe continued. We find in Tanakh the prophecy of Yeshaya. We find how Yeshaya said something undesirable on Yidden, and then a hot coal was put on his mouth. And we're talking about a Navi like Yeshaya, who's one of the most desirable and famous Nevi'im, and most of his Nevuas was said after this incident, and his Nevuas are full with so many desirable inyanim. It's brought in Chassidus many times that Yeshaya is Meloshn Yeshua. He brings help and assistance to Yidden. So we have to understand for what reason, first of all, how come that something like this should happen to Yeshaya, and what is the lesson, what we derive from the fact that it is related to us that it happened to Yeshaya. So Rebbe explains this, that in Gemara there's expression many times about certain things which certain people committed, when they committed something wrong, that really they were not at the level of doing this wrongdoing. However, why did they do it? They did it because they wanted to open and show the way for tshuva in such a situation. Hoyreisa derech tshuva, to show the path of tshuva. And we always know to open the door for something is a hard avodah. In other words, to be the very first to do it. Once it was already done, once it already happened, then it can easily be followed. See, this explains. In Zoya we have many times the expression Posach Reb Shimon. What's the pshat? Posach Reb Shimon. What did he open? If Reb Shimon said something, what was it a taich he opened? So, excuse me. So Chassidus explains Posach means he opened the gate, the opening for this type of a pshat, for a perush. Once he opened it already, then we can elaborate more and more on it. But we had to come on to Reb Shimon to discover this perush. The same when we're talking about Yeshaya. This entire incident took place so that if in later years somebody will come, who can compare himself to Yeshaya, Miyidmeloi or Miyishveloi. But the idea behind all of this is that in later generations, should somebody come and say something against Yidden, we should know that the path was already opened to be able and do tshuva. Rabbi says, let these words reach wherever they have to. It's not important who is the one that's saying it. Especially we know there's an expression, Kabbalah ha'emes memisha amri, accept the truth from whoever it was said. And he did not say anything of his own. Whatever we said is in Yonah, which are discussed in Svarim and are discussed in Psukim. And all of this is extremely important. And here again the Rebbe kept on stressing how we are waiting for Mashiach, we are waiting for Geula. And Geula could even be today, this afternoon, while we are still in the middle of Shabbos. We are waiting for Geula. And Bechlal, the Inyan in believing in Mashiach is something which we constantly are obligated to believe in the coming of Mashiach. Which this is one of the 13 Ikrim, one of the 13 main basic principles, main principles which we are obligated to believe in. And one cannot say that he will believe in 12 of them, but he will not believe in the 13th. And believing in Mashiach means that we constantly have to believe. Part of the belief is that we are believing that any day can he come. Well, let it be so that he should come and take us all out of Gullus, and we will be associated together with those Yidden who are in Eretz Yisrael. We will be joining together with them. And then we will have access to the Beis HaMikdash, and we will be able to fulfill all of the Karbanis as it should be, as we read about, K'mitzvas Ritzonecha, as it is the desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and as we read about it in the Kriya and the Kriyas HaTorah of today of Parshas Vayikra, and we go on continuing in Parshas Tzav. After the first Sicha, began singing a nigun. The Rebbe was extremely happy and was making with his hands, and instantly the Rebbe stood up to dance, was dancing and making with his hands in a very, very strong way. Tremendous expression of simcha was on the Rebbe by this very, very special dance. A gute Woche and a kosher and freilich Pesach. Something took place this week in Eretz Yisrael. There was a big, I don't know how to call it, in Yad Eliyahu, a big mass conference. Yes, which was addressed by Shach, and the entire media focused very strongly on it. Because in Eretz Yisrael, there's the government crisis, and he has the parties which he's influential in. Is the party of Degel, and he also has an influence in the party of Shas. And they attracted all the correspondents and the entire media to this conference because they thought that this will be something which will play a major role, whether they will join with the Labour Party or they will join with the Likud. And Shach got up there and spoke how bad the Likud is, and how even worse that the Labour Party is, that they're all the kibbutz people cannot even be considered as Jews, and they are, chazer eaters and camel eaters, referred to Yidden in terrible, terrible way. Terrible way. And this made the newspapers all over. I think CBS even had it, because everybody thought that this is going to be some sort of a deciding factor which party they will go with, and therefore this will be a deciding factor how the government in Israel will be formed, whether Likud will have additional power or the Labour Party would. And it was, as the Rebbe mentioned, that negative words about Yidden were spoken, and it was translated in other languages, and it reached to Goyim and all that. So it seems that what the Rebbe spoke today was a response to this attack on Yidden which took place this week in Eretz Yisrael. That's what it seems like. Tshuva in itself is a tremendous kindness, if I may use this expression, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, the Rebbe gives us a power that an act which was done is totally erased. Then there are specific areas of sin. In this specific area of talking bad against Yidden, it was Yeshaya who opened the door to do tshuva in such a case. For himself. And this gives power, us today, that should anybody of us fall through in this category, it is through the assistance of Yeshaya who opened the gates of tshuva, in this particular area, that we too can do tshuva.